What changes have you seen in your community throughout your lifetime in regards to environment, people, or culture?
Uh, well, when I was young here in this community, most of the community was at that time geared to working in the bush, and there was a lot of farming at that time. It wasn't as many trees as there are here now. It was very, very open, a lot like Manitoulin when you see the big open areas. And the horses used to run free here on the reserve all over that they would keep for the winter working in the bush. And as kids, we used to walk everywhere. I mean, everything was, you never ride anything. It was, if you were lucky, you had a bike, but most of the time you walked, and you went anywhere you went to visit anybody. It was all done with by foot. A lot of the visiting that was done between the elders and community members was all done with horses and wagons or horses and sleighs in the winter. So a lot of that was basically, geared to living with horses as our main means of transportation. Even in the spring and the winter, we used to go across in the spring before the ice broke, or in the fall. As soon as the ice was, or in the winter, as soon as the ice was strong enough, we'd go across the lake to go get the supplies for the winter. And back then, the kids were pretty much free to do what they wanted on the reserve, because school wasn't really as scheduled as it is here now. We only went to school when they got a teacher in, and sometimes they never got the teacher in until late fall, sometimes closer to winter, and sometimes the teacher never came in until the spring. So we didn't have a lot of schooling the way they have it now. I've seen a lot of changes in the community in regards to now the kids. Most of them have bikes or like little small scooters or four-wheelers, or back then we walked everywhere. Now people ride everywhere, and there's a lot more. Kids have more freedom of movement in regards to going distances where we used to be limited as to how far we could go, because you could only go as far as you could walk in a day. But yeah, and the kids back then seemed to spend a lot more of their time outdoors. Like when we played hockey in the winter, we went down and we played hockey from the time it got light until the time it got dark. The time you come off the ice is when your parents called you and told you come on in and eat, or you're gonna starve. So it was a lot of time spent canoeing, fishing, hunting. I remember going with my dad to go and hunt down below in the lower French. He used to have to take the canoe and jump in the canoe and go across the French and go and hunt on the other island. And there wasn't much hunting done here. Like I said, it was mostly open. But we used to travel to go and do the hunting.
Historically, the land was and continues to be a very important part of Anishinaabe identity. Why do you think the land is so important to our people?
Well, I think anybody is tied to the land. When you want to belong somewhere, it's where you belong. And as Anishinaabe people, we were here. We were the first here, and then we lost a lot of our identity because we were pushed around from area to area. And I know that our people used to travel all the way from the St. Lawrence all the way across to the other coast, because even when we're traveling now and you're going through Michigan, Minnesota, out in the prairies in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, you see names that are familiar to us here, because a lot of it was French mixed in with the native, because our one of our chiefs was called Michel de l'Aigle, which is French, which means Michel of the Eagle clan, and we see all those names all the way across. And apparently some of us still have relatives in Maniwaki, and some have relatives down in Minnesota. So they're spread all over the country, and the land was a means of making sure that you had someplace to come back to. And even you notice it now with my own grandchildren, when they're gone, they look at Dokis as their center where they want to come back to. So even though Ashley lives out in Manitoba, Manitoba, and or Alberta rather, and Trina's going to live in North Bay, and they think of Dokis as home, not where they are now.
Why do you think it's important we gather traditional knowledge of our land, water, and ceremonies and animals for our community knowledge keepers? From our community knowledge keepers.
Well, like I said, a lot of the elders around here used to have a good knowledge of plant-based, what we could use in the plants to use as medicines or as spiritual gifts, and over the years we've kind of lost that, and it's really important for natives to understand how to live off the land and to use what the land provides to be able to live a good life. And over the years I know in my own family we didn't record what my mother, who was a healer, who used a lot of the medicines naturally, we didn't record that and make sure that we save that. So a lot of that basic knowledge of plants and their uses is gone, and we should have held on to that. So it's really important for the kids now to start to learn that forgotten stuff, because it makes them more in tune with what's happening to the land. And we used to know before that at a certain time in the spring, when you see the yellow butterflies, the sturgeon were coming up, and you go and spear them. Or when the frogs started singing, you knew that it was time to go down and spear fish. And you see those first little white butterflies, you knew that the suckers were spawning, and time to go out and chase them. And then in the fall again, when you saw the first signs that the leaves were falling, well, it was time to go out and hunt deer, so you can get some meat in before it got too late. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we have to be able to understand that that's a part of us.
As Anishinaabe people, we have roots, and we're born with a connection with the spirit, and we all have some sort of knowledge. What's your story and understanding of traditional knowledge?
Here in Dokis, we never had a lot of traditional knowledge. Like I said, we did stuff that was cultural, although we didn't really know it. I mean, we always went out in the spring and we got the first water when we, at Easter time, when we got the first water. It was a traditional way of acknowledging that, well, the water's there for our use, and it should be maintained. And we used to go in the fall, and my dad would make sure that they tried to do everything respectfully. When they killed a deer, they would make sure that they didn't waste any part of it. They took the whole deer, even the skin, and now you don't see as much of that as before. And I think that's really important for Native people to understand that if you don't respect nature and you don't utilize the gifts that Mother Earth gives you, you're going to be lost. And that's what happens to a lot of Native people. And I think a lot of our whole community here ended up being lost because we didn't have that cultural aspect. When the missionaries moved in, they made sure that they killed all the native language and the native religion that was here, and they forced the Catholic religion on us. So that's the way a lot of us were brought up. I understand that a lot of us used to speak Indian until we started school, and as soon as I started school, my mom and dad told me at home, well, you can't speak Indian anymore, you got to speak English so that you'll be able to do well at school. So that's why a lot of us lost our culture and our language and our heritage.
As Anishinaabe people, what do you think is most valuable and key to maintain our identity?
Well, I think the first thing is the language. It's nice to see that the community here is making sure that we maintain that portion of the curriculum in our schools is to make sure that the language is there. On top of that, to be able to say that we have a teacher in our school system that is teaching the kids not only the language but also the culture along with the language, and then to have ones like you who are coming up and starting to help the younger kids pick that up and learn. It's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of language speakers left in our community. We don't have many. The ones that we do have mostly came in from other reserves and are living here now, but our own native speakers are very few. There's very few left in our community, and it would be nice to see some of the younger ones come up, and it's nice to see young boys like what's his name, Jigger's boy, who's Connor, learning to speak the language and to be able to speak in front of people fluently, and that's key to making sure that you maintain your culture, because any type of culture, like the Chinese, the Italians, the Greeks, whoever come over here and live in our country, they don't leave their language behind. They bring it with them, and along with the language, they bring their culture, and that's what we need to do. We need to maintain that core, because if we become just like everybody else, we're just a number.
Mm-hmm. What was it like growing up in this community?
Well, like I said, when we were growing up, it was pretty free. Like, I mean, we never had much limitations. Our parents let us pretty much do what we wanted, and it was really nice because it was all geared to hunting, fishing, trapping, stuff like that, and lots of sports. And it was a really good time because we didn't get involved in any kind of negative activity. There was no drugs. There was very little drinking with the kids, and it was nice to be able to grow up in that environment because we didn't have any peer pressure. I mean, everybody got along with one another. It was really a lot of fun, and everybody went to everybody else's house, and we never had any parts of the reserve that were segregated. I mean, they were all got along together, and we all played together, and it was really, really nice. It was community oriented, and you don't, like, you're starting to see a little bit more of it breaking apart, and then that's unfortunate because when you see the kids now, they don't, they're not as cohesive as we were when we were kids, because we went around in big gangs. It was 10, 15 people walking around all together, and now you're lucky if you see 4 or 5 of them together. It's not the same.
What memories do you have about your parents and our grandparents?
Well, my parents were, my mom was a product of the residential school, so she was kind of more the rule giver in the house. Like, I mean, we had to mind our P's and Q's and make sure that we were well dressed and make sure that we were clean and got everything done what was supposed to be done. We had our list of chores that we had to do. My dad was a little bit different because he was more easygoing, and he, wanted to talk to everybody. A lot like Gordy was, like, just go around and talk to this one, talk to that one, spend all their time just basically traveling around and visiting. And my grandfather and grandmother were the ones that I really felt a good connection with, because I went to spend a lot of my summers visiting with them and spending time with them, because they had so many stories that you like to be able to hear, and it was nice just to sit down and listen to them tell you what it was like back then. And it was always fascinating to me to see or to hear about what it was like when you went to Algonquin Parks and you were guiding, or when you worked for people in North Bay, as my grandmother did. And even my mom's story is the same thing, telling us how she used to work as a maid, and then how she met my dad and came over and eventually moved to Doki's here. So it's memories that you carry of your parents and your grandparents that are kind of the storytellers and the knowledge keepers. So nice to see.
What message do you have for the youth or future generations of your community?
Oh, never forget where you come from, for sure. And to make sure that you stay strong in your community and your culture. I think family is the most important thing you'll ever have. And if you lose sight of the fact that your family is your core, you're going to be one of those people that are lost in society, where you don't have any connections, you don't have anybody to fall back on. I think every kid recognizes the mother and the father as the anchor, and the grandmother and the grandfather as the center of their whole community and their family. So it's nice to see, and that's really important. So don't ever forget where you come from.
What are some memories you have about fishing or hunting?
Well, like I said, when we used to go fishing, as soon as you got those little signs in the spring that the suckers were running, you went out and you got as many suckers as you could. And when the pickerel were spawning, you went out and got pickerel when you could. And in the fall, you'd set some nets before the winter came so you could put some away. And I remember salting fish in barrels and canning deer meat in cans and bottles to put away for the winter, so you'd have that over the winter, because we didn't have much freezers, and you had to save your food some way. I remember using salt pork and fish that was all salted down, and big sticks of bologna that you went and got and kept them for as long as you could. But yeah, we traveled a lot to go hunting. We used to leave this island, go to the other island to go and see if we could get enough deer to keep you going for the winter. And even during the winter, if you happen to see a deer when there was crust on the snow, you could run on top of the crust and the deer would break through, so you'd run over and you'd be able to get yourself a deer. And I can still remember going hunting in the middle of the winter with my dad and my brother-in-law to go and see if we could get a moose, because we were running out of meat in the winter and you needed something to eat. So we snared rabbits to keep going. We shot partridge in the fall, and basically it was hunter-gatherer way of life. And we trapped, and everything we trapped we kept and we ate. The muskrats and the beavers and everything else we ate. I can even remember, I think, trying raccoon one time. It was part of the trap line, and we ate it.